broken clock is still right twice every day, and even the worst movie franchises still have their high points. So today we're going to look at the best movies from the worst movie franchises. While I'm talking, be sure to join me down below in the comments section. Let me know, what do you think are the best movies from each of these franchises? Also, which of these franchises are you mad that I included because you still think that they're awesome and you don't think they belong on a list of worst franchises? Also, as we go into this, there are some worse franchises than some of the ones I listed here. 50 Shades of Grey, 365, Human Centipede. Just one big problem, I haven't seen any of the movies from any of those franchises, so I can't pick the best from those franchises. Real quick before we get started, this video is brought to you by my supporters over on Patreon. Patreon is a membership site with a bunch of exclusive videos and live streams. In fact, there's a companion video to this one over there where I pick 5 more of the best movies from the worst franchises. I do a couple of weekly live streams over there. At the top tier, you can do a one-on-one video chat with me each month that you're a member up at that tier. Also, this video was proposed and voted on by my supporters over on Patreon, so if you like this video, you can thank them for making it happen. You can learn more about Patreon at the link down below in the description. And let's get started. As we dive into this, the franchises aren't in any particular order. Basically, I tried to pick the worst franchise of various different categories. Kicking things off, the worst YA franchise, Twilight. Now, this started off as a book phenom, turned into a film phenom about an underage girl who's stuck in a toxic, codependent love triangle with a 100-year-old man who's dead and a dog.
Are you kidding me?
That's the basic premise of Twilight right there. There's a certain amount of understandable escapist fantasy in there about a girl that feels ordinary and undesirable who is suddenly being wooed by 2 different very exciting people that think that she is absolutely the most wonderful girl in the world and so desirable. But the rest of it is toxic melodrama that sends an absolute horrible message that is aged horribly. I mean, the second movie in the series is literally about a high school girl who becomes suicidal because her high school boyfriend broke up with her. Yikes! And considering it's labeled as a saga, there's shockingly little story here. I mean, it's all just like melodrama and just high school crap, except where one of our high schoolers happens to be 100 years old. But there is one mild exception to all of this. My pick for the best of the worst here, Breaking Dawn Part 2, the last movie in the Twilight saga. Finally, after all of these movies, there's an actual threat and an actual conflict where the Volturi, the vampire ruling class, take issue with them having a child or whatever. And so they're coming to like take the kid. And so because of this, all of our heroes in our small town have to team up, unlikely alliances between vampires, werewolves, and then they like recruit the mob squad of superpowered people all over the world. You have a final showdown at the end of it, sort of. They cheated with what they do with the plot, but there's actually some action. There's a plot to the movie. And so of these terrible movies, the best of the worst, Breaking Dawn Part 2. Next up, we're looking at creature features, and I'm going with the Jaws franchise. Now, of course, you know which movie I'm going to pick for the best here because Jaws the movie is a perfect film that spawned a very goofy franchise, and hopefully my wife doesn't watch this video because she loves Jaws. She loves bad shark movies, so she'll be deeply offended that I would include Jaws in this video. But had they decided to make the Jaws franchise like an anthology series where each different story is set in a different town with a different shark attack, perhaps it could have worked and been interesting. Instead, they made every film about the Brody family. So the second movie is a decent enough rehash. It strains some credibility. It's not nearly as effective, but hey, it's okay as delivering more Jaws stuff with the returning actors. Then we get into the third movie, and there's a third shark attack, this time at SeaWorld and in 3D. If you were lucky enough to see it over 40 years ago when it was in theaters, now when you watch it at home, it just looks very goofy when they do the 3D effects that aren't 3D. Then the fourth movie turns into a full-blown revenge movie that quite literally has the word revenge in the title, where the shark is out for revenge against the Brody family, follows them around the globe, freshwater, ocean water, doesn't matter. This shark is out for revenge. This is stupid. But, of course, the best of the worst here, the original Jaws. It is the movie that basically invented blockbusters. It's the movie that put Steven Spielberg on the map. It is the movie that Quentin Tarantino has called the best movie ever.
I think Jaws is the greatest movie ever made. Maybe not the greatest film, but it's the greatest movie ever made.
It can be fun, thrilling, funny. The characters are lively, interesting. They complement each other really well. Spielberg directs the crap out of the film. It is a perfect blockbuster. It has stood the test of time. It's awesome. Doesn't really lay a great foundation for a franchise, though. Moving right along to superhero movies, we have the Sony SpiderMan universe without Spider-Man. So, over 25 years ago, Marvel was in serious trouble. The comic book company, they needed money, they were going into bankruptcy, and they had never had a hit film before. This is before Blade, this is before X-Men, and so Sony was able to snatch up the rights to Spider-Man and his adjacent characters dirt cheap. Jump forward a couple years, the Sam Raimi Spider-Man film makes bukus of money. It's a massive hit trilogy. Even the third movie was just printing cash for them. And so going back 15 years ago, Sony was like, wait a minute, Spider-Man characters print money. So they've been trying to make a Venom movie forever. And then with the Amazing Spider-Man films, they really wanted to set up a Sinister Six film. In particular, you can see in the Amazing Spider-Man 2, which turns 10 this month, that they were trying to find a way to lay the foundation to do a bunch of villain spin-off films. The movie underperformed. They decided to cut a deal with Marvel Studios, so then they rebooted with Tom Holland joining the MCU, which made their plans to have a Spider-Man shared universe very tricky since they put Spider-Man in someone else's shared universe. Thus, the eventual birth of the Sony Spider-Man universe, or the Spumunk as it was originally called, without Spider-Man.
Stupid! You're so stupid!
Here we are. We've got a couple Venom movies, a Morbius movie, and then Madam Web earlier this year. Craven is coming out later this year. Actually, we have another Venom movie coming up. They almost did like a one starring Bad Bunny as El Muerto. And it's simply a cynical attempt by a studio to leverage a IP that they own to make money in just the stupidest way possible, by taking characters that are not designed to carry movies and putting them front and center. So Morbius just stumbled right out of the gate. There's all just cynical attempts to tie it into the MCU by putting Vulture in there and then putting wall art in the trailers of Spider-Man that's not even in the movie. And then you get Madam Web, which whatever that thing was, where they literally have scenes in it where they're attending the Parker family baby shower for the unnamed child. It's Peter Parker, but they won't say Peter Parker because that's too close to putting Spider-Man in their Spider-Man universe. Horrible stuff. So what's the best of the worst here? I could go either way on either one of the Venom films. When the first Venom came out, I was very negative on it, but with time, I appreciated it more. And then when the second one came out, my expectations were proper, so my initial reaction to that film was much more positive than the first film. Each of them have gigantic issues. I think each of them have a certain amount of fun to them because they don't take themselves seriously. So the Venom movies, I think, generally speaking, work well enough is just big budget B movies, which by definition, a big budget film can't be a B movie, but they're not aiming high. They don't have any big grand ambitions. They just want to have some fun with them. And the Venom character is both popular enough and compelling enough to carry a film without needing Spider-Man, unlike all of these other characters that they've done this with. So They work for me, and I'm excited for the third one. I'm not excited for anything else in this universe, though. Then we got a horror franchise. We're going with The Exorcist. Once again, you know which movie I'm going to pick is the best here. But the original film was an adaptation of a hit book that was also very well regarded, and the film itself made an enormous amount of money. It is well regarded as one of the best horror films of all time, and also just one of the best movies of all time that has stood the test of all time. But when your movie makes a ton of money, you want to try and print more of that money. So it was followed up by a sequel, which is widely regarded as one of the worst movies of all time. And it is truly baffling, the choices that were made with The Exorcist 2.
So I went in the screening room and I see some guys riding on the back of a bumblebee or some fucking thing. It was unreal. And I left.
Third movie, much better regarded. A lot of people do enjoy the third film. And then it was followed by a prequel that was so troubled during its production that they went full Zack Snyder's Justice League on this one, reshot the entire movie, and there's 2 different versions of The Exorcist prequel. And then, of course, last year we got The Exorcist Believer. Yikes, that was not good. One of my least favorite films of last year. And much like the Jaws franchise, this is a 70s movie franchise where it started with a perfect film that is a best of the genre and launched a very bad franchise. The original film was groundbreaking in how shocking it was, the depth of its exploration of faith, and doubt, and having, once again, wonderful characters, effects that freaked people out at the time that it came out. One of the best movies ever made, but once again, not a movie designed to lay the foundation for a bunch of additional stories. And so when they tried to tell additional stories, it just hasn't worked. And it's another one where I think maybe there's some world where you could have done an anthology series here, much in the same way that kind of what the Conjuring films have done, and the good Conjuring films being a good example of what you could do with that, the bad Conjuring films be an example of how that could go poorly. But they didn't do that. They tried to continue the tale of the same characters, the same possessor and same exorcist, and I just don't think it's working. Next up, we're looking at a blockbuster franchise, the Transformers films. Now, the Transformers film franchise goes all the way back into the 1980s when they decided to make a film adaptation of the TV show that existed simply to sell toys. And they made a movie where they intended to kill off the toy line so they could introduce new toys to sell more toys to children. That's the starting point for all of this, and you can see where this can lead to trouble. Hop forward 20 years, we get the Michael Bay Transformers films. First one, pretty good. A lot of great spectacle in there. Solid film. Second one, quality drops an enormous amount. Some of that was due to a writer's strike that happened to where they legitimately didn't have a proper script when they started filming the movie, and it shows when you watch it. Third film, good bit better. Great spectacle in the third act. But the Michael Bayisms definitely start to shine through and take over in that third film. And then when you get into Age of Extinction, actually shot right down the road from where I live, as well as Last Night, it just goes full-blown Michael Bay, nonsense plots, visual noise. They put more thought into explaining why a grown man can date an underage girl than they do to the plot of the film.
This is illegal. She's a minor.
Protected by the Romeo and Juliet laws. Statute 2705-3.
Texas statute?
And it just loses itself. Just so overblown. Then we get Bumblebee. Talk about that one in just a second. And then we do Rise of the Beasts more recently, and it was fine, but just felt like we're missing something. What's the best of the Transformers movies in my mind? It is Bumblebee. It's the one where they decided to actually make a character-based Transformers films. You get spectacle, action, cars are robots turning into cars, robots turning into jets. You get a little bit of Cybertron. But at its core, there's characters you actually care about. It slows down enough to have actual emotion to it. It's the E.T. formula, the girl in need of a friend finds it in Bumblebee with Haley Steinfeld, great in this sort of thing. You got some John Cena in there. So for me, it's the one that has plot, character, spectacle, and humor. That's what I want from Transformers. It's the one that delivered it for me. I put up a poll and asked you what is the worst animated franchise, and definitively you picked Trolls, and I am going to agree with you on that one, much to the dismay of my youngest, Karis, who adores the Trolls movies. My two oldest kids never got super duper into the Trolls movies. We have had a Trolls karaoke machine since 2017, but then the new movie came out and Karis just is obsessed with Trolls. And in fact, her plan for this upcoming Halloween is for her to go as Poppy and for me to go as Branch. And so the songs are constantly being played in our house, and I've seen the latest film far too many times. Anyway, when it comes to the Trolls movies, I grew up with the original Trolls dolls. I don't even know where the original one we were about. They've been around forever. So we had Trolls dolls growing up, and then out of the blue, they decided to make movies out of it. And I just feel like they played the lowest common denominator on every single level. Cute things singing. Okay, yeah, kids like that. Bright colors, cute hair, bright, sparkle everywhere, and songs. Kids love that. Adding to that, fart jokes, where there's characters that fart glitter, fart cupcakes, just that sort of thing. Just so base level, dumb humor for kids. And I was so happy my two oldest didn't get into it. But my youngest is obsessed with it. She wants the Trolls video game now, so I'm hunting down to see when it's on sale because I can't possibly justify paying full price for a Trolls video game. So what's the best of the worst? For me, I'm going Trolls Band Together. Maybe I'm biased by this one because I have a child obsessed with it, and when your child is happy about something, then you're happy for your child. I took them to the press screening for this one and everything, and Karis just ate it up. So, that's a fun memory. But beyond that, I think they dialed back some of the crassness and dumbness of the first two movies. It's still dumb, but it's not as much farting glitter. There's less of that in this film. I think the message is better here. It's not as contradictory. It's not like the first movie, they're like eating trolls and stuff to get happy with the Bergens. Like very weird stuff in the first one. And this feels like the stuff that really bugged me about the first two is diminished. The stuff that works a little bit better, or it's harmless fun, is amplified. So for me, Trolls Band Together wins. Karis, don't be mad at me for calling Trolls one of the worst franchises out there. But it is. Today's video is brought to you by Raycon. You may have heard me talk about Raycon's everyday earbuds before and thought, hey, I can get the same sound quality as the big guys at half the price. But if you haven't pulled the trigger on a pair of Raycons, now is the time to check them out because they've just launched their upgraded model of the best-selling everyday earbuds. Raycon's upgraded everyday earbuds have active noise cancellation, an ergonomic design, and multi-point connectivity that lets you pair with two devices at once. They're available in a variety of vibrant new colors to complement any and all skin tones. I went with blue to match my pretty blue eyes. I used mine on my recent trip to Nashville. The active noise cancellation canceled out enough of the plain noise that I could hear my music and audiobooks. They have optimized gel tips for a cozy, comfortable fit. I actually slept with mine in my ears. They were comfortable enough and non-invasive enough that I could do that. With the upgraded model, there's no better time to check out Raycon. Go to buyraycon.com/Sean Chandler today to get 20% off your Raycon order plus free shipping. That's right, you'll get 20% off and free shipping at buyraycon.com/Sean Chandler, buyraycon.com/Sean Chandler. And let's get back to it. Looking at comedy movies, I'm going with the movie series. Now, this isn't a franchise in the same sense as most of the other franchises here, but I would certainly argue that it's a franchise in its own sense. So the movie franchise started with Scary Movie back in the year 2000. It was directed by Keenan Ivory Wayans. It was written by several of the Wayans brothers, as well as Jason Friedberg and Aaron Seltzer. Now, the Wayans brothers, after a couple of these movies, decided to go off and do their own thing, and Friedberg and Seltzer decided to just crap out a bunch of these spoof movies that they wrote and directed themselves, where all they do is take a just hodgepodge of popular culture things, mash them together, and do a silly, stupid version of them.
Now we match! Yay!
And I kid you not, the average Rotten Tomatoes score of the 7 movies that they wrote and directed is a 2.2%. 2.2%. That's the average for 7 movies. 2 of their movies have a 0%. Another one has just a 1%. 2 of them have a 2%. The high mark, their best reviewed movie that they wrote and directed, only has a 7%. That's crazy. So which one was the best of the worst? I think for me, pretty easily, it's the original Scary movie from the year 2000. It was a proper spoof movie that was spoofing the late 90s horror films, primarily the Scream films, as well as I Know What You Did Last Summer, but just a lot of that era of horror and film. And it was trying to do something clever and play off of them, not just doing a silly version of scenes from those films. Now, it was directed by Keenan Ivory Wayans, and then a couple of the Wayans brothers wrote it and then starred in it. I'm not like a massive Wayans brothers fans. I watched a lot of In Living Color growing up. They can be funny, they can be clever, and you see that in this film. There's actual setups, payoffs, actual jokes, not just copying popular culture, but really stupid and silly. So this is the one, or the couple of them, the couple early ones, where there was some actual comedic talent on display, some merit to what they were doing. So for me, easily the best. Then we've got another horror franchise. We're going with Hellraiser. Now, the original Hellraiser is based off of a short story from Clive Barker, and the original film was written and directed by Clive Barker and has a very distinct vibe, aesthetic, atmosphere. It like infuses a sexuality to it in a way that you don't normally see in horror films like this. It's creepy. There's wild creature designs. In the first 2 movies, it's truly shocking that these movies were able to get an R rating in the 1980s. By the 3rd movie, some different people took over, started getting pretty goofy. There's like a guy with CDs in his head as one of the Cenobites. By the 4th movie, they do Pinhead in space.
You serious?
And after that is when things start getting really bad. After Pinhead in space is when it gets really bad. And it just like devolves into just direct-to-video hell for 20 years, where a bunch of these movies may have been just these spec scripts that the Weinsteins decided to like cram Pinhead into.
As a matter of fact, it was.
Make them dirt cheap, have a couple scenes of Pinhead, and like it is a rough franchise to binge through because there's like a never-ending supply of these direct-to-video terrible, terrible films. So what is my pick for the best of the worst? I'm going to go with a super hot take here, I imagine, on this one. I'm going to go with the remake from just a couple years back. Maybe I'm a little bit biased on this one because I didn't watch the Hellraiser movies until essentially I'd watched the remake. I was at the first public screening of Hellraiser at Fantastic Fest of the remake. And then when I went home, I decided to watch through the rest of the films. I'd seen the original Hellraiser, but I hadn't seen the rest of them. And for me, there's some interesting ideas in the first 2 Hellraiser films, but the lore is still kind of like unexplained, or it's distant. There's not a set of rules to everything with the box and everything like that. And so I felt like the remake pulled all the best elements of the lore, had a tighter, clearer story to it, while keeping the creepiness, the creature designs, the gore, the infusion of sexuality, and there's like this clear hierarchy or sort order to the configurations of the lament configuration, all of that fun stuff. And so I just felt it was a better version of what they did before. Now, it was, of course, building off of all of Clive Barker's works. It couldn't have existed without it, but it was able to build on top of what was done before, and I just thought it was a better, tighter version of it. So I put up a poll asking which is the worst franchise that won't die, and you picked Jurassic Park or Jurassic World. Now, the original Jurassic Park was an adaptation of the book, the hit book from Michael Crichton, and essentially you had this perfect storm where Michael Crichton put out his best, most mainstream book that pulled all these themes that he'd been working on for decades and just had the best packaged version of it. And Steven Spielberg decided to direct it at the peak of Spielberg's fame, creativity, all of that fun stuff. And it was right as CGI became good enough that it could be used. And you just had the perfect storm for a perfect blockbuster that I was also the perfect age to see it when it first came out. And naturally, it made bukus of money, and dinosaurs are fun. So we've gotten 5 sequels over the last 30 years. We got another one coming out next year, and you can debate the merits of the various sequels, but there's no debate that there's been a significant drop in quality from the original film. None of the sequels have come close to what the original did, and in the more recent films, we've had talking dinosaurs, human clones, Alan Grant committing espionage in evil Apple headquarters, locusts, and it just feels like we lost something. And the franchise just won't die. What's the best of the worst here? Obviously, it's the original Jurassic Park. It's another perfect blockbuster from Steven Spielberg, and that it came out almost 20 years after Jaws, and when a lot of technological advances in cinema had changed dramatically since Jaws, in large part due to Steven Spielberg, it is a blockbuster of a very different era from Jaws, so they feel radically different from one another while both being iconic blockbusters. It has the awe and wonder of discovering dinosaurs. There's a little horror. There's a little bit of humor. There's a phenomenal score. Everything about it is fantastic. It has stood the test of time. It still works. The characters are intriguing. The movie doesn't even get into the horror side into it until you're over halfway through the film. And the first half is just as wonderful because you're seeing all these different characters explore this fascinating world. And it's amazing to see dinosaurs brought to life. So, of course, Jurassic Park. Final category on here, remakes, and we're going with the Disney live action remakes. This is another franchise like the movie franchise that's not a franchise in the same sense as, say, Jurassic Park, but obviously there is a continuity and sameness to these films, so I think it does fit in this video. So back 15 years ago, they put out this requel of Alice in Wonderland, and it made $1 billion. And then a few years later, they put out Cinderella, and it made a ton of money. And in 2017, they put out Beauty and the Beast, and it made $1 billion. When you start seeing the pattern here, we remake one of our classics, we make $1 billion, you decide to copy and paste. And the floodgates were opened, and over the last 6-7 years, we've just had this non-stop stream of Disney remaking their classic films, whether it makes sense or not, whether the films were hits or not, whether they understood why something like Beauty and the Beast had like cross-generational appeal, thus made $1 billion. They didn't understand any of that. They just put out a zillion of these things, and they've now announced a zillion more of them. And some of them are totally soulless cash grabs. Some of them have actually worked for me. But which will be my pick for the best of the worst here? I'm sure this is a hot take for many of you. I'm going to go with Aladdin. Perhaps it's because my kids loved this one. I was the perfect age for the original Aladdin when it came out. I even had the cassette tape with the original version of Arabian Nights with the lyrics that they have changed in all subsequent releases. And then my kids were the perfect age to adore the live action remake to it. If you're going to do a live action version of a story, you want something that fits as an adventure and fits in the format. I think Aladdin does that well. They found a way to get the perfect person that can be just as energetic and charismatic as Robin Williams, but not be anything like Robin Williams. And so I thought Will Smith did a great job with it. They found just the right subplots to add into it that's a little bit different. It has a little bit more there without feeling like, what are we doing here? Like in Beauty and the Beast, they added the Black Plague. Doesn't help the story. Adding a little bit of a romance for the genie so he has his own story separate from serving others helps the character. And so I think it worked there. I thought this was a great way to do a different version of Aladdin that's true to what came before, but also adds just enough of its own flair to it to be worth existing. So that's my pick for the best of the Disney live-action remakes. But then again, I mean, none of these things are particularly phenomenal in that one. Remember, this video is voted on by my patrons, and there is a companion video over on Patreon where I'm going to give my picks for the best of the worst in 5 more franchises. If you want some awesome audio at half the price, check out Raycon. Hey, thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV.